Hello everyone. Welcome to this session where we are going to discuss the genetic engineering and ethical concerns related to genetic engineering. You know, friends, with the recent developments in the technology that can help us alter our DNA, which can help us alter our genes, we are facing new kind of challenges, and which are not just the negative consequences of the genetic engineering or anything like this, but it is indeed the ethical concerns related with the new advanced technologies such as genetic engineering. So in this session, we are going to talk about what is genetic engineering, some know-how about genetic engineering, and along with that, we are also going to look into some of the ethical concerns related to genetic engineering. So let's go ahead and have a look at what is genetic engineering. So basically, genetic engineering means that you are modifying the genes, or it is also referred to as the genetic modification. All right, it is the process in which you alter the DNA in an organism's genome. So what is DNA? From your basic understanding of science, you know that the DNA, which is also known as the deoxyribonucleic acid. All right, deoxyribonucleic acid. This deoxyribonucleic acid is the genetic material of the human beings. It is genetic material of human beings as well as many other organisms. All right. There are certain organisms which, instead of deoxyribonucleic acid, has RNA as its genetic material, but otherwise, in majority and vast species of organisms, you are going to find the DNA as the genetic material. Now, this DNA, in DNA, there are certain segments. All right, there are certain segments, and these segments are known as genes. These genes, they give us our physical characteristics. All right, the genes, they give us our physical characteristics. If you look at this diagram, which is on your screen, you see that in our cells, there is nucleus. Inside the nucleus, there are chromosomes present. Chromosome is a condensed form of our genetic material, that is DNA. DNA is present in our cells in two cell organelles. One is known as the nucleus, and second is known as the mitochondria. Mitochondria. So in your cells, inside the nucleus, there is chromosomes, and these chromosomes are condensed form of your DNA. This DNA, it has certain species on it, which actually result in your physical characteristics, and these pockets are known as the genes. That is, your DNA or your genes, they are present in the chromosome inside the nucleus of your cells, and your DNA is also present, in the mitochondria. All right. Now, the entire DNA of the organism is known as the genome. The entire DNA of an organism is known as its genome. So we can say that the various genes, they make up, all right, the sum of all the genes, they make up the genome, or you can say the entire DNA of an organism. Now, genetic engineering means that you are going to edit the gene of an organism or the DNA of an organism. So genetic engineering, which is also known as genetic modification, is the process by which you alter the DNA in an organism's genome. This is the very well accepted definition of genetic engineering, that you are using techniques to alter or tweak the DNA in an organism's genome. But how do you do that? Let's have a look at it. Now, if we talk about the types of genetic engineering, the genetic engineering can be done at a very minutest level by altering the base pair in a DNA. Now, you know that if you look at the structure of DNA, the structure of DNA is a double helical structure which was given by Watson and Crick. All right, the DNA's structure is a double helical structure given by Watson and Crick. Now, if I unfold this double helical structure, it looks something like this, which you can see on your screens. Now, here you see this is known as the sugar strands. Let me tell you what are the sugar strands, or you call them as the sugar backbone. So you see this thing here, these pentagonal structures. These pentagonal structures, they are known as the sugar backbone of the DNA. All right, sugar backbone of the DNA. Actually, I have unfolded the DNA that I have drawn on the screen, and in the unfolded form, a DNA looks something like this. So there is a sugar backbone which is made up of pentose sugar, which is made up of pentose. This is a pentose sugar. On the pentose sugar, there are some nitrogenous bases attached, and these bases, they are in the form of C. C stands for cytosine. G, G stands for guanine. T, T stands for thymine, and A stands for adenine. So there are 4 nitrogenous bases in a DNA, which comprises of A for adenine, corresponding to it T for thymine, then G for guanine, and corresponding to it is C for cytosine. Now the thing is this, these base pairs, they always associate in combination. That is, C will always associate with G and G will always associate with C. T will always associate with A and A will always associate with T. This way, there's always a proper base pairing that you can see in the DNA. Now, through genetic engineering, what you can do is you can change one of the base pairs. Like for example, using the genetic engineering, I can change this base pair, which is CG by AT. This change in the DNA sequence will result into a significant amount of change in the body and the characteristics of the human being, right? Or any organism in which this change is done. So one type of genetic engineering is when you change the base pairs. That is, you change the AT base pair with CG or vice versa. So one type of genetic engineering is the genetic engineering that result into change at the DNA level in the base pairs. The base pairs which are attached to the sugar backbone, they are tweaked or they are changed. This is one type of genetic engineering. Then furthermore, what you can do is that you can also completely delete a whole region of DNA to introduce an additional copy of the gene. I told you that if you look at your DNA is made up of a sugar backbone, and upon that sugar backbone, there are nitrogenous bases. Let us say this is ATGC and CGAT. Now, the combination of base pairs that result into secretion of certain proteins in your body, which otherwise then result into certain physical characteristics in your body. That combination of the base pairs is known as the gene. This is known as the gene. All right. For example, there is a combination of the base pairs on your DNA that is responsible for your hair color. So that gene is your hair color gene. There is a combination of the sequence on your DNA which may be responsible for your eye color. That gene is responsible for the coloration of your eyes. Like for example, my eyes may be of black color. That is because the gene is giving it or is resulting into secretion of certain proteins that result into the black coloration of my eyes. But at the same time, my brother may have the blue eyes. Similarly, my hair are blonde, but my brother's hair are black because we both have these different pairs of genes, right? Now, through genetic engineering, you can also replace one entire gene. You can replace an entire gene. So now, like for example, if I want in my child, if I want in my child, you can say the blue eyes instead of black eyes. So what I can do, I can prevent this gene to be expressed in my child and instead replace this gene with a gene from my brother and fix it here so that my child will not have the black eyes like me, but he will have the blue eyes like his uncle. All right. So this is one of the other methods of genetic engineering in which you delete one whole region of DNA, which is known as gene, which is responsible for physical characteristics in the body. All right. So basically what we are doing in genetic engineering, either we are changing the base pairs of the DNA or we are actually replacing the entire gene. All right, this is just a diagrammatic representation. This is not how genetic engineering is done. Please pardon me. It is just for the purpose of representation that you can see that an entire part of the DNA, which is a gene, which is a combination of certain base pairs that gives certain physical characteristics to the individual, is being replaced in this genetic engineering technique. So this is the genetic engineering technique that involves complete replacement or changing of the sequence of the DNA called as gene that is responsible for giving the individuals their physical characteristics. All right, let us go ahead now. Now, what is the purpose of genetic engineering? So purpose of genetic engineering help us understand the utility or the benefits of genetic engineering. If we look at the purpose of genetic engineering, you know that the genes, I already told you that the genes, they are responsible for the physical characteristics. All right. Even going before, let me tell you how genes are responsible for the physical characteristics. Now, the genes, you know that genes are the combination of the base pairs. All right. They are the combination of the base pairs on the DNA. Now, so your DNA is converted into RNA by certain enzyme. All right. Then on RNA, the ribosome actually translate on this RNA and read the codes that were there in the DNA and yield what are known as amino acids. These amino acids, they combine together to give protein, and then protein gives you the physical characteristics. All right, so what I have done is I have explained you the entire process of central dogma. So the genes, which are the combination of the base pairs on your DNA, using some enzyme, they are converted into RNA. This process is known as transcription. This process is known as transcription. After transcription, the RNA is translated by ribosome, and this process is known as translation. When ribosome translates over your RNA, it secretes amino acids which arrange themselves and give rise to proteins. And proteins give you the physical characteristics. So this is how the genes are responsible. All right, this is how the genes are responsible for giving physical characteristic traits to you. All right, and that is why I have in the very beginning already iterated to you that genes are responsible for physical characteristics. But now, if you can alter the genes, then you can certainly alter the physical characteristics. You can get the desired characteristics. All right, you can get the desired characteristics in your body. All right, like for example, I told you that suppose my brother is a prodigy who is having an IQ of, let's say, 160, whereas I have an average IQ of 120. Now I want my child to have an IQ of 160. So those genes which are responsible for the intelligence quotient, my genes will not be transferred to the child. Rather, in my chromosome, I will tweak my chromosome by introducing that segment of the gene of my brother's genomic sequence, which is responsible for his IQ of 160 into my chromosome. And when mating, my child will get my chromosome and he will be having an IQ of 160 from a parent of 120. Similarly, I can also think about many other desired characteristics in my child, which can be some physical endurance, which can be even also, if not physical endurance, it can be as you can say typical things such as eye color, hair color, skin color, and many other things. So by genetic engineering, because you are tweaking the genes means that you can also tweak the physical characteristics of the individual. All right, so you can acquire desired characteristics by genetic engineering. Then apart from this, sometimes there are certain genes which are responsible for some diseases. All right, like for example, if you think about the breast cancer, all right, so breast cancer, a gene is particularly responsible for development of a malignant tumor in the breast of a human female. That gene is known as the breast cancer gene. So using genetic engineering, you can remove those genes so that the chances of the natural occurrence of breast cancer can certainly come down. Or you can alter the base pair in that gene such that that gene is no longer expressive. So genetic engineering does not only result into acquiring of the desired characteristics, but genetic engineering also eliminate the undesired characteristics. So genetic engineering is used for expressing the desired characteristics as well as suppressing the undesired characteristics, which is very important to be understood. Now, some of the example of the genetic engineering include the genetic and genetically modified crops. The genetic modified crops, they are pest resistant. They are pest resistant, such as GM cotton, such as GM brinjal, such as GM soybean. All right. So there are pest resistant. They have high yield. All right. They have high yield. Their productivity is much higher. All right. They are drought resistant. These are the desired characteristics which we have acquired by what is known as the genetic engineering. You know that recently the government of India has introduced the Dhara mustard hybrid. The Dhara mustard hybrid is also a product of genetic engineering. All right. Then you also make use of genetic replacement therapy to prevent certain human diseases such as breast cancer. So it is that genetic engineering is not merely bad. It has to be used properly. It can also result into some wonderful outcomes. So let's have a look at the genetic engineering and ethics debate. So basically, when this genetic engineering began, many people, they started becoming worrisome because now the man started dictating the nature to the minutest of the level, that is the genes. That is, man has begun, tweaking the genes or tweaking the minutest of the level to which a technological change can take place, and that is the DNA of the individual. So this minutest, or you can say dictating the nature to the greatest of the levels, that is the genetic level, this has resulted into a serious debate whether man is playing foul with nature or not. And that is why the proponents of ethics, they are raising questions over genetic engineering. This debate particularly intensified. All right, this debate particularly intensified after the human embryos. All right, after the human embryos, they were thought to be used for research purpose. All right, the next significant development took place in 1996 when the first genetically engineered clone was developed in the form of Dolly the sheep. All right, this is Dolly. This Dolly the sheep, it was created by cloning using the genetic engineering technique. All right, and of recently, two macaques, all right, two crab-eating macaques have been genetically developed. All right, they are Zongzong and Hua Hua. This Zongzong and Hua Hua, they are the genetically engineered crab-eating macaques. All right, and now the human beings are on the, you can say, trajectory of playing with the nature at the genetic level, and the proponents of ethics are questioning this particular development because they believe that this is not an appropriate way to play with nature. So now let us have a look at it, some of the ethical concerns that have been raised with respect to genetic engineering. The first and the foremost thing is that because genetic engineering results into trait selection at the genetic level, it will result into parents rushing for the genetic haves and have-nots. The parents, they will be looking for some of the important characteristics that your children will have, some of the features your children will not have. So it will result into some nervous parents pushing forward to genetic haves and have-nots. This will result into a kind of genetic discrimination. All right, it is going to fuel genetic discrimination. All right, some of the genes, they will be espoused, some of the genes, they will be despised. So think about this way, that the Brad Pitt's gene will be most sought after and Rajpal Yadav's gene will not be that sought after. All right, so it was just on a lighter note that I wanted to comment. Then it is going to promote something known as eugenics. Eugenics means that people will deliberately enter into marriage only to produce certain desirable genes. All right, people will enter into marriage only with the people with the desirable genes, so that some genes can be, you can say, can become the dominant population gene. All right, so eugenics will be promoted. Eugenics means that you align the population as per the requirement of the genes, or only those people will mate who have certain genes required. So again, it is going to introduce what is known as genetic discrimination. Then these genetically modified organisms, they are also facing, all right, the genetically modified organisms which have been created by, you can say, genetic engineering, even they are also facing the question that they are a threat to biodiversity. The genetically modified organisms are artificial organisms and they can interfere with the nature. All right, they can interfere with nature. All right, this will be a big threat to ecological equilibrium. This will be a big threat to ecological equilibrium. Then it is also seen that we have not yet seen the impact of the genetic engineering on human health and safety. All right, Stephen Hawking. All right, Stephen Hawking, he has mentioned that genetic engineering has a potential to change the future course of mankind, but it is a very slow process because the impact will be reflected only after 18 years. All right, it will be reflected only after 18 years. And my dear friends, this is why even Stephen Hawking was saying that if you really want to assess the effect of genetic engineering on human health and safety, you might even have to wait for 18 years. All right. Then apart from this, if we go further, all right, then, tweaking the nature and life is yet another ethical concern that the people have. That is, you are playing with nature and you are also playing with life. So this is unethical because nature is something that one should not play with. All right. And then because you are playing with nature, you are playing with life, you are also interfering with the process, which is a natural process called as evolution. Evolution, if meddled with, evolution, if it is not properly, you can say, if evolution is not given the due respect, it is possible that the interference with evolution will ultimately result into some long-lasting negative consequences for the human being. All right, long-lasting negative consequences for human being, because evolution is a natural process and it has to take place through the dictates of nature and not by the human being. And lastly, these genetic engineering. It is an invasive procedure on the animals. All right, so the animal's right to life, the animal's right to dignity, even that is compromised because this genetic engineering is a very invasive process, and therefore the animal's right to life and dignity, even that has to be protected. You cannot play with animal just because he is not a human being. So these are the ethical concerns that are related with genetic engineering. So we have to draw some line somewhere between genetic engineering and its ethical concerns. All right, we have to keep in mind the ethical concerns, and we have to arrive at a global common minimum where every country agrees to certain limit where genetic engineering can be used and limits where genetic engineering cannot be used. So now I'll conclude this lecture, this session, by the very comment of Vandana Shiva, who is you can say the environmentalist feminist in India. She has said about genetic engineering that genetic engineering has never been about saving the world. It's about controlling the world, and therefore we have to be very cautious about using genetic engineering. She gave this particular statement with respect to the genetically modified organisms such as genetically modified crops, because they are threat to ecological diversity, they are threat to ecological equilibrium, and this is what has been, you can say, remarked by Vandana Shiva, who is a feminist ecologist. All right. So with this, I'll conclude the session. Thanks for watching it. Thanks for lending all your eyes and ears to us. I hope you took a lot of important lesson from this particular session. See you next week on Tuesday with next science or ethics related video. That's all from my side. Have a great day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.